Hello everyone, here we are. We're going to pick up at 2 Kings chapter 15. And if you remember, we had Azariah. He was the king of Judah. This is where we left off. And we had Zechariah as the king of Israel. So let's get started. In the 27th year of Jeroboam, king of Israel, Azariah, son of Amaziah, king of Judah, began to reign. He was 16 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 52 years. His mother's name was Jechaliah. She was from Jerusalem. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father Amaziah had done. The high places, however, were not removed. The people continued to offer sacrifices and burn incense there. So what are the high places? Those are the places where there are Asherah poles, and Asherah poles were very phallic looking and were most likely in honor of fertility. And people would dance around them and do all kinds of stuff. Pardon me, you know, my hair is always in my face somehow. So, you know, this was very pagan and certainly was not what the Jews were supposed to be doing. So he did not take down these places, unfortunately. The Lord afflicted the king with leprosy until the day he died, and he lived in a separate house. Wow. So for 52 years, this person had leprosy, this poor king, Azariah. Jotham, the king's son, had charge of the palace and governed the people of the land. As for the other events of Azariah's reign and all he did, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Judah? Azariah rested with his ancestors and was buried near them in the city of David, and Jotham his son succeeded him as king. Wow, so that's the end of him. Now we go to Zechariah, the king of Israel. In the 38th year of Azariah, king of Judah, Zechariah, son of Jeroboam, became king of Israel in Samaria, and he reigned 6 months. So contrarily, he reigned a very short time. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, as his predecessors had done. He didn't turn away from the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which he had caused Israel to commit. Shallum, son of Jabesh, conspired against Zechariah. He attacked him in front of the people, assassinated him, and succeeded as king. The other events of Zechariah's reign are written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel. So the word of the Lord spoken to Jehu was fulfilled. Your descendants will sit on the throne of Israel to the 4th generation. Shallum, son of Jabesh. Now, Shallum is Shalllum, son of Jabesh, became king in the 39th year of Uzziah, king of Judah, and he reigned in Samaria 1 month. Then Menahem, Menahem, son of Gadi, Gadi, went from Tirzah up to Samaria. He attacked Shallum, son of Jabesh, in Samaria, assassinated him, and succeeded him as king. The other events of Shallum's reign and the conspiracy he led are written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel. So it looks like Shallum attacked Zechariah and assassinated him in front of the people, and then had the same thing done to him by Menahem, son of Gadi. At that time, Menahem, starting out from Tirzah, attacked Tifsah and everyone in the city and its vicinity because they refused to open their gates. He sacked Tifsah and ripped open all the pregnant women. That was also prophesied, if you remember. In the 39th year of Azariah, king of Judah, Menahem, son of Gadi, became king of Israel, and he reigned in Samaria 10 years. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord. During his entire reign, he didn't turn away from the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which he had caused Israel to commit. So they're stuck. They're just stuck in these sins. Then Pul, P-U-L, king of Assyria invaded the land, and Menahem gave him 1,000 talents of silver to gain his support and strengthen his own hold on the kingdom. Menahem exacted this money from Israel. Every wealthy person had to contribute 50 shekels of silver to be given to the king of Assyria. So the king of Assyria withdrew and stayed in the land no longer, so he was bought off. As for the other events of Menahem's reign and all he did, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel? Menahem rested with his ancestors, and Pekahiah, his son, succeeded him as king. In the 50th year of Azariah, remember Azariah had leprosy and reigned 52 years and lived in a separate house. In the 50th year of Azariah, king of Judah, Pekahiah, son of Menahem, became king of Israel in Samaria, and he reigned 2 years. Pekahiah did evil in the eyes of the Lord. He didn't turn away from the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which he'd caused Israel to commit. And let's look at what this sin was. We do remember there were golden calves built and erected for the Israelites to worship. So it was the sin of idolatry and faithlessness that they keep mentioning Jeroboam, son of Nebat, caused Israel to commit, okay? One of his chief officers, Pekah, son of Remaliah, conspired against him. Taking 50 men of Gilead with him, he assassinated Pekahiah along with Argob and Ariah in the citadel of the royal palace at Samaria. So Pekah killed Pekahiah and succeeded him as king. Boy, it's just one assassination after another going on here. The other events of Pekahiah's reign and all he did are written in the books of the annals of the kings of Israel. In the 52nd year of Azariah, which was his last year, king of Judah, Pekah, son of Remaliah, became king of Israel in Samaria, and he reigned 20 years. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord. He didn't turn away from the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which he'd caused Israel to commit. In the time of Pekah, king of Israel, Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, came and took Ijon, Abel, Beth-Makkah, Genoa, Kedesh, and Hazor. Those are all towns, okay? He took Gilead and Galilee, including all the land of Naphtali, and deported the people to Assyria. Then Hosea, son of Elah, conspired against Pekah, son of Remaliah. He attacked and assassinated him and then succeeded him as king in the 20th year of Jotham, son of Uzziah. So this is just like bang, bang, bang. They're all being assassinated. As for the other events of Pekah's reign and all he did, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel? Or perhaps what we're seeing is they're getting assassinated because they also assassinated the king before them. In the 2nd year of Pekah, son of Remaliah, king of Israel, Jotham, son of Uzziah, king of Judah, began to reign. He was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 16 years. His mother's name was Jerusha, daughter of Zadok. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord. Yay, finally somebody. Just as his father Uzziah had done. The high places, however, were not removed. The people continued to offer sacrifices and burn incense there. Jotham rebuilt the upper gate of the temple of the Lord. As for the other events of Jotham's reign and what he did, are they not written in the books of the annals of the kings of Judah? In those days, the Lord began to send Rezin, R-E-Z-I-N, king of Aram, and Pekah, son of Remaliah, against Judah. Jotham rested with his ancestors and was buried with them in the city of David, the city of his father, and Ahaz, his son, succeeded him as king. Okay, so we're going very quickly through quite a few kings, okay? You don't have to remember, there's not going to be a test, how they're all set up and situated, because we're talking about 2 provinces. We're talking about Judah, and then we're talking about the rest of Israel as its own kingdom, okay? And then there's capitals like Samaria, etc., Jerusalem. it seems a little confusing, but we're really talking about the kings of Judah and the kings of Israel. And let me remind you again why we have a separation like this within the Israelites, okay? The reason that there are two is because Solomon sinned and displeased the Lord. So the Lord took the kingdom away from him and said, but for your father David's sake, I'm going to leave you a little something. And he left him Judah, the tribe of Judah. And I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe there's another little tribe in there like Benjamin. But the rest of them, the other 10 tribes are out there and they're Israel. So these are all Israelites, but there is enmity and there is friendship between the kings, okay? So this is what we're hearing about. We're hearing about here's Jerusalem, here's their kings, here's Judah, here's Judah's kings, and then over here we've got Aram and other various kings that come against them, but they're not Israelites. They're well, I don't know. They said the Arameans, they said that there were Israelites there, so I'm not quite sure. I'd have to be a theologian to understand some of this. But we're looking basically at two tribes or two groups, the Israelites and then the Israelites of Judah, okay? And so that's what the book of Kings is predominantly concerned with, are these two groups of Israelites, okay? All right, so in the 17th year of Pekah, son of Remaliah, Ahaz, son of Jotham, king of Judah, began to reign. Ahaz was 20 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 16 years. Unlike David, his father, David, who is King David, who would be the father of this whole line, he did not do what was right in the eyes of the Lord his God. He followed the ways of the kings of Israel and even sacrificed his son in the fire. Oh my gosh, that's the worst sin that he could have done. God abhors child sacrifice. Engaging in the detestable practices of the nations the Lord had driven out before the Israelites. He offered sacrifices and burned incense at the high places in the hilltops and under every spreading tree. Then Rezin, R-E-Z-I-N, king of Aram, and Pekah, son of Remaliah, king of Israel, marched up to fight against Jerusalem and besieged Ahaz. And, you have to imagine that the Lord's allowed this because he's sacrificing his son in the fire, and he's just an evil king. Okay, excuse me, I lost my place. Marched up to fight against Jerusalem and besieged Ahaz, but they couldn't overpower him. At that time, Rezin, king of Aram, recovered Elah for Aram by driving out the people of Judah. Okay, so we're talking about cities here that are being recovered. Edomites, Esau's line, then moved into Elath and have lived there to this day. Ahaz sent messengers to say to Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, I'm your servant and vassal. Come up and save me out of the hand of the king of Aram and the king of Israel who are attacking me. And Ahaz took the silver and gold found in the temple of the Lord and in the treasuries of the royal palace and sent it as a gift to the king of Assyria. The king of Assyria complied by attacking Damascus and capturing it. He deported its inhabitants to Kir and put Rezin to death. Then King Ahaz went to Damascus. So King Ahaz is saving himself somehow. Then King Ahaz went to Damascus to meet Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria. He saw an altar in Damascus and sent to Uriah the priest a sketch of the altar with detailed plans for its construction. So Uriah the priest built an altar in accordance with all the plans that King Ahaz had sent from Damascus and finished it before King Ahaz returned. When the king came back from Damascus and saw the altar, he approached and presented offerings on it. He offered up his burnt offering and grain offering, poured out his drink offering, and splashed the blood of his fellowship offerings against the altar. As for the bronze altar that stood before the Lord, he brought it from the front of the temple, from between the new altar and the temple of the Lord, and put it on the north side of the new altar. So he found this altar in Assyria. Or in Damascus, he saw an altar and wanted another one built like it. King Ahaz then gave these orders to Uriah the priest: on the large new altar, offer the morning burnt offering and the evening grain offering. The king, so he's moved the bronze altar of the Lord out of the way and put his new big altar up there, okay? The king's burnt offering and his grain offering and the burnt offering of all the people of the land and their grain offering and their drink offering splash against this altar the blood of the burnt offerings and sacrifices. But I will use the bronze altar for seeking guidance. And Uriah the priest did just as King Ahaz had ordered. King Ahaz cut off the side panels and removed the basins from the movable stands. He removed the sea from the bronze bowls. Remember the big, huge washing water on top of 12 bronze bowls, and they used it for feet washing and cleansing at the temple? So he's breaking all of this down, which Solomon had built. He's removing everything, cutting it apart, sticking stuff over to the side. He removed the sea, S-E-A, from the bronze bowls that supported it and set it on a stone base. He took away the Sabbath canopy that had been built at the temple and removed the royal entryway outside the temple of the Lord in deference to the king of Assyria. As for the other events of the reign of Ahaz and what he did, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Judah? Ahaz rested with his ancestors and was buried with them in the city of David, and Hezekiah, his son, succeeded him as king. Sad to see these people be so disobedient. All right, in the 12th year of Ahaz, king of Judah, Hosea, son of Elah, became king of Israel in Samaria. So now we're going to look at Israel. And he reigned 9 years. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord. Now, why does the Lord care about both of these camps doing evil? Because they're all Israelites. They're his people. Okay, whether they're in Judah or whether they're in Israel, no matter who the king is, God wants fidelity and he's not getting it, okay? So that's why we're hearing about the ones that did evil, and most of them did evil. A few of them did right by the Lord, but most of them did evil. None of them, even the good ones, didn't remove the altars that they should have removed or the Asherah poles in the high places. So we're seeing some real sloppy, slovenly behavior from all of these kings, but these are God's people, the Israelites. So he cares about both, and that's why we're hearing Judah, Israel, Judah, Israel. Okay, so Hoshea, son of Elah, became king of Israel in Samaria. He reigned for 9 years. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, but not like the kings of Israel who preceded him. Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, came up to attack Hoshea, who had been Shalmaneser's vassal and had paid him tribute. But the king of Assyria discovered that Hoshea was a traitor, for he had sent envoys to So, S-O, king of Egypt. And he no longer paid tribute to the king of Assyria as he had done year by year. Therefore, Shalmaneser seized him and put him in prison. The king of Assyria invaded the entire land, marched against Samaria, and laid siege to it for 3 years. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria captured Samaria and deported the Israelites to Assyria. He settled them in Halah, H-A-L-A-H, in Gozan on the harbor river, and in the towns of the Medes, M-E-D-E-S. Those are the Persians, folks. All this took place because the Israelites had sinned against the Lord their God, who had brought them up out of Egypt from under the power of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. They worshipped other gods and followed practices of the nations the Lord had driven out before them, as well as the practices that the kings of Israel had introduced. The Israelites secretly did things against the Lord their God that were not right. From watchtower to fortified city, they built themselves high places in all their towns. They set up sacred stones and Asherah poles on every high hill and under every spreading tree. At every high place they burned incense, as the nations whom the Lord had driven out before them had done. They did wicked things that aroused the Lord's anger. They worshipped idols, though the Lord had said, "You shall not do this." The Lord warned Israel and Judah through all his prophets and seers, "Turn from your evil ways, observe my commands and decrees in accordance with the entire law that I commanded your ancestors to obey, and that I delivered to you through my servants, the prophets." But they wouldn't listen. and were as stiff-necked as their ancestors who did not trust in the Lord their God. They rejected his decrees and the covenant he made with their ancestors and the statutes he warned them to keep. They followed worthless idols and themselves became worthless. That's an interesting point. You know, you're known by who you serve, and if you're serving something that's worthless, it just sort of nullifies you. It's like, boop, you make yourself worthless. You're of no effect whatsoever. They followed worthless idols, and they themselves became worthless. They imitated the nations around them, although the Lord had ordered them, do not do as they do. They forsook all the commands of the Lord their God and made for themselves 2 idols cast in the shape of calves, Jeroboam, son of Nebat's sin, and an Asherah pole. They bowed down to all the starry hosts. That's star worship, astrology, okay? And they worshiped Baal, B-A-A-L, who we've been hearing about. They sacrificed their sons and daughters in the fire. They practiced divination and sought omens and sold themselves to do evil in the eyes of the Lord, arousing his anger. Now, I want to bring something up here. There has been talk about, you know, Israelites that sacrifice their children even up into this day. And I have said, well, those are not, you know, clearly those are not real practicing Israelites. I mean, they may be of Israeli heritage, but you can see right here how generational sin could come through a family line and could lead to more present day sinfulness in this regard. Okay, I mean, you can see it. It's right here. There was a time where the Jews, some of them at least, if not a lot of them, were sacrificing their children in fire. So they are not, and this was the one sin that God wanted them to not do, to separate them from the nations all around them, the pagan nations that were sacrificing their children in fire. He also wanted them to not have sex to worship him the way pagan cults did, okay? And I'm sure there were other little things, but those were the main ones, and the main one was don't sacrifice your children. Make yourself separate from the nations around you that are doing this disgusting pagan practice. Okay, well, here you can see that they've gone right into it, okay, that they're doing all these detestable things, and I'm sure the Lord's stomach was just turning, and he was extremely sad and unhappy. So you can see how generationally these things could come forward to our time today, where you would see that there are some Jews who are not separated from the nations that are sacrificing children, okay? Because, you know, everybody, there's still sacrifice of children going on, and it's everywhere. It's all over the world. You just don't hear about it because it's underground. And of course, rightly so, but, you know, the goal would be to eradicate this kind of behavior. But, you know, I don't know. Since the beginning of time, they've been sacrificing children. All right. You know, in the spiritual realm, blood is the currency. And unfortunately, the purest blood that you could get would be a child, and that's why they do it. All right, it's disgusting. Whereas you can see that Christians, we have the blood of Christ. It's done, Jesus said. It's done. It's finished. We don't need to sacrifice children. We have Jesus's blood. Okay, do you see the difference there? Okay, so here we go. They forsook all the commands of the Lord their God, made for themselves 2 idols, cast in the shape of calves and an Asherah pole. They bowed down to all the starry hosts. That is astrology. And they worshipped Baal. They sacrificed their sons and daughters in the fire. They practiced divination, which is magic and witchcraft, and sought omens and sold themselves to do evil in the eyes of the Lord, arousing his anger. So the Lord was very angry with Israel and removed them from his presence. Only the tribe of Judah was left. And this is the tribe that Jesus Christ came through. And even Judah didn't keep the commands of the Lord their God. They followed the practices Israel had introduced. Therefore, the Lord rejected all the people of Israel, afflicted them, and gave them into the hands of plunderers until he thrust them from his presence. When he tore Israel away from the house of David, they made Jeroboam, son of Nebat, their king. This is when he said to Solomon, "You're losing the kingdom right now, but I'll leave you Judah." So this is a reference to that. When he tore Israel away from the house of David, they made Jeroboam, son of Nebat, their king. Jeroboam enticed Israel away from following the Lord and caused them to commit a great sin. The Israelites persisted in all the sins of Jeroboam and did not turn away from them until the Lord removed them from his presence as he had warned through all his servants, the prophets. So the people of Israel were taken from their homeland into exile in Assyria, and they are still there. That's what it says, and they are still there. The king of Assyria brought people from Babylon, Cutha, Ava, Hamath, and Sepharvaim, and settled them in the towns of Samaria to replace the Israelites. They took over Samaria and lived in its towns. When they first lived there, they didn't worship the Lord, so he sent lions among them, and they killed some of the people. It was reported to the king of Assyria, the people you deported and resettled in the towns of Samaria do not know what the God of that country requires. He sent lions among them, which are killing them off, because the people do not know what he requires. Then the king of Assyria gave this order: have one of the priests you took captive from Samaria go back to live there and teach the people what the God of the land requires. So one of the priests who'd been exiled from Samaria came to live in Bethel and taught them how to worship the Lord. Nevertheless, each national group made its own gods in the several towns where they settled and set them up in the shrines the people of Samaria had made at the high places. The people from Babylon made Succoth-Benoth. Those from Cutha made Nergal, and those from Hamath made Ashima. Those are gods. The Avites made Nibhaz and Tartak, and the Sepharvites burned their children in the fire as sacrifices to Adramelech and Anamelech, the gods of Sepharvaim. They worshiped the Lord, but they also appointed all sorts of their own people to officiate for them as priests in the shrines of the high places. They worshiped the Lord, but they also served their own gods in accordance with the customs of the nations from which they had been brought. So it's just complete grotesque, almost religious chaos. To this day, they persist in their former practices. They neither worship the Lord nor adhere to the decrees and regulations, the laws and commands that the Lord gave the descendants of Jacob, whom he named Israel. When the Lord made a covenant with the Israelites, he commanded them, do not worship any other gods or bow down to them, serve them, or sacrifice to them. Why? Because they're not the Lord. They're not going to serve you. They can't do anything for you. They are dead gods. Don't waste your time. But the Lord who brought you up out of Egypt with mighty power and outstretched arm is the one you must worship. To him you shall bow down, and to him offer sacrifices. You must always be careful to keep the decrees and regulations, the laws and commands he wrote for you. Don't worship other gods. Do not forget the covenant I've made with you, and do not worship other gods. Rather, worship the Lord your God, for it is he who will deliver you from the hand of all your enemies. And that's the Lord speaking. They would not listen, however, but persisted in their former practices. Even while these people were worshiping the Lord, they were serving their idols. To this day, their children and grandchildren continue to do as their ancestors did, which is exactly what I was telling you before. Generationally, this stuff has come through, and people are still sacrificing and still worshiping false idols. And you see the huge astrology worship we have going on. I mean, why are you worshiping stars that were created by God rather than worshiping the God who created the stars? It's insanity. Anyway, okay, I love you. Tomorrow we're going to get going with 2 Kings 18. There are 25 chapters in this book. So we have another few days with them, maybe 2 days and 3 days, and then we are on to most likely Chronicles. I love you, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.